Hi, good morning, everyone. Thank you to the organizers of Web3 Festival. We're glad and we're super excited to be back here in Hong Kong. Today, I'm going to share with you a little bit about where we see the industry as it is today and the opportunities that we see moving forward. And especially here in Hong Kong, we're super excited because I'm sure, as many of you are aware, the progress recently with the areas of regulation and how our markets are opening up globally, but we also see that Hong Kong is going to be a lead market here. So I think right at the tail end of our presentation, you'll see, as we announce some of the major partnerships that we've launched recently and our teams here to kind of engage with the community while we're here. So let me introduce Zetrix. And Zetrix is our layer 1 project. And the way that we looked at it was, as an industry, blockchain over the last decade or so, as nascent and burgeoning as it is, has still remained quite concentrated into a very select and arguably small population in the relative sense of the global population of very tech-forward and tech-savvy users. So we asked ourselves, what would it take to make Web3 technologies more pervasive, more ubiquitous, so that it becomes like how you think of databases today. Nobody thinks about whether the app on your iPhone runs on a MySQL or a Postgres database. The app just has to work. So I think over the last decade or so, a lot of us have started adopting different parts of blockchain. Now, obviously, cryptocurrency being at the forefront in terms of leading the adoption. But we identified that to make this possible, to make it accessible for the average Joe, you need two other key stakeholders to be able to add value and play a part, namely governments and enterprises. And looking at how they've been progressing over the recent few years, we believe that it's the right time to go into the next wave of technologies. So today, I think we're very privileged to be living in the present reality where we have been connected via the internet. And the internet has connected really our countries, our enterprises, and our communities together. But it is still a network of centralized systems. So we ask ourselves, as you and I walk through the streets today, we have access to multiple systems, but they still sit modular and separate from each other, connected by just this one internet. And even with cloud computing, they are more connected, but still not interoperable. So we ask ourselves, how can we make this more accessible and seamless? And we've proven this recently with the launch of our first product, where we work together with China's national blockchain, Xinghuo, and our key partners in China, Beito, who have access to the traffic police department data. And we try to build out a use case that a layperson can just do, and most importantly, not have to reinvent or relearn new technical skills to be able to leverage the technologies of Web3. So right now, if you're a Chinese national, we do not need you to learn a new language or a new app. Simply use I believe still the most popular app in China, WeChat. And they simply log in as how they do today and interact with the mini app that then verifies the driver's license that they upload. And that gets verified by our, what we call trust anchors, in this case, Beito and the police department, to essentially issue on-chain a verifiable credential. And for us, this is a key innovation because in the present way that the centralized systems interact, you still need two centralized systems to talk to each other for data to be verified. By doing this and committing this on-chain, what essentially can happen for this gentleman or lady that's using the verifiable credential is that they can travel out of China. And for example, when they rent a car or when they have to register themselves with the authority of another country for them to be able to drive, or even to just use the driver's license as another form of identity, it doesn't need persistent connection and re-verification from the centralized original system, in this case, the police department. So this becomes a verified credential that can be trusted, that's immutable, and has with it built security, compartments where it is safe to use, but doesn't compromise the core original system. So the way that we do this in different countries as we work together with governments is slightly different depending on their incumbent ecosystems, but the essential framework is the same. We work with issuers who then provide the service to users and enable a set or an open set of verifiers to be able to interact with the verifiable credentials. With the issuers, we identified, obviously, that the key hurdle is in the technical ability to be able to build the applications. And we have, I think, progressed quite a lot as an overall IT industry to have been able to use IP tools over the last couple of decades, that we used a similar approach when we're working with these large enterprises or government stakeholders. They do not have to relearn Web3 technologies. They do not have to rebuild stacks as they have today. They use APIs to be able to interact and open up their services to the developer community that wants to build dApps upon it. And these get issued as verifiable credentials that are given, issued, and stored within the possession and control of the user, which means that you then remove the dependency of this middleman. And as it goes out, you can then use this verifiable credential with other verifiers, and depending on the design of the VC, either a permission verifier or in some cases, VCs, as you'll see later, that can be used openly by lots of different stakeholders. We call this system ZCert, which is our base stack for ID, and it can be used by multiple agencies, governments, and enterprises seamlessly, and it rides on Ztrix blockchain. But as I'll share with you later, interoperability is really one of the key tenets that we're trying to build upon. So when we looked at this, we couldn't design a standard from the ground up, and we shouldn't. So we looked at what would be the most feasible way moving forward to lessen the resistance to be able to adopt. And we're very lucky to find that as the industry has progressed, the United Nations and CFAC have advocated for self-sovereign identity and verifiable credentials as key technologies to be able to facilitate the movement of data across borders and across enterprises. And even more so, the World Wide Web Consortium, or W3C, has also suggested that the verifiable credentials can become a common standard. So this is key because as we build along these standards, it lessens the friction for another enterprise or another ecosystem to adopt. So when you saw the end user example of the Chinese driver's license that I shared earlier, the same base approach can be applied to lots of different other documents or credentials. So of course, we're working quite closely with parties to build out national IDs, and as countries go towards digital IDs, we envision that blockchain will be a key enabler for that within the country, but also in interoperability outside of their borders. Academic qualifications are fairly key. Today, I think we take a lot of them for granted as just things that you have and you report on your CV, but it becomes actually very, very difficult and yet meaningful to have to verify those. And this is probably a form of a verifiable credential that you do not need permissioned actors to be able to access, right? You would just need the user to want to share it, and anybody else that they share it to should be able to verify. But then you move into some more sensitive documents, such as banking statements or key and sensitive financial data that either are associated to the person or to the enterprise. And those, it makes more sense to build the VC with a couple of security components attached to it, where only the right kind of organizations can then verify. And this can still be achieved with the same kind of standards that we've been building upon, as I've shown you before. But then what we've been really concentrating on over the last year has been the most meaningful one, because as the first three are key enablers, you still have to build out use cases which are really commercial and where there's real money attached to it. And cross-border trade has been around for a long time and has oftentimes been met with lots of hurdles of interoperation and integration, because the different systems across countries and the components or the actors involved in trading are not entirely integrated. But with verifiable credentials, these documents can move seamlessly across borders and read, or pretty much seamlessly across differing systems. So when you look at this particular use case, we've been concentrating on, for example, certificates of origin, which are key. So I'm from Malaysia, and Malaysia is part of the ASEAN-China Free Trade Agreement. The certificates of origin are key documents that need to be verified in order for goods which are exported into China and vice versa to receive or redeem the zero tariffs associated with certain goods. But this becomes a key hurdle when the process is very cumbersome, and the documents have to be either shared hard copy or verified and re-verified in soft copy. But with a verifiable credential, it can move seamlessly across systems, and the constituent users along that chain are always assured that it's still a valid and a valid and legitimate document. We also extend this to other documents such as phytosanitary certificates and other things which are associated with moving goods across borders to keep the transaction safe, the trade feasible, but most importantly to speed up the actual process overall. What we've seen in the early pilots is that this takes down clearance time at customs or port down from 4 days down to a few hours. And that can save ultimately about half of the time on average and 40% of the associated costs at the import point. So we do believe that these kind of use cases are the most meaningful ones to build upon, where you are using Web3 and blockchain technology in the back end, but really translating that to real economic benefit. So with this, on Ztrix, we've built a few modules which can then be used and reused for different applications by the developer community, ZCert for our ID solutions, and Ztrade to facilitate lots of verifiable credentials associated to cross-border trade and enterprise-based use cases. But we're totally aware and cognizant of the fact that the languages, the technical challenge lies in the fact that a lot of Web3 technologies have new and proprietary languages. And we've taken the counterintuitive approach of building with what enterprises probably have already been investing in over the last few decades. Their developers probably already know things such as what we support today, Node.js, Java, and Go. And in addition to this, using WebAssembly language, we remove the friction associated to the actual programming language, such that enterprises and even independent developers can build with languages that they already know with a compiler that then translates this to something interoperable on our network. But our network cannot do this alone, and so we've invested into building the bridges and interoperability with some key partners. As I shared earlier today, we're key partners with Singho in China, providing our first connectivity to a major government blockchain. But we're also cognizant of the fact that a lot of the developer community have been building around Ethereum. And so we built bridges onto Ethereum, but a lot of the enterprise community have been experimenting over the last 5-8 years on private chains such as Hyperledger. So building connectivity with governments, the open development platforms, but also the proprietary and closed or private platforms enables us to be able to seamlessly move data across our network, but also to each other's networks, so that we can build out and the compounding effects of developing as an overall ecosystem. So with this, we believe that keeping to the core tenets of having an ID or innovative ID system, enabling permissioned and identified actions on a blockchain, building upon self-sovereign identity, and complying with what we have been very lucky to have witnessed recently, the establishment of common global standards, is the way forward in order to be able to build these real-world applications that can be used by the masses. With this, we can then establish identity and artifacts onto blockchain for companies, for assets or goods or things, and also people. So today we might be walking around with lots of different social logins. The goods that you work with or the documents you work with may exist in different forms, but moving forward, they can all comply to a single standard that can move seamlessly across different systems. And so that's where we will end up with a scenario where we as individual users or users within an enterprise have access to the data that we're associated with seamlessly through a single window, which might be a blockchain address, but more importantly, a blockchain address that can then transmit data between different systems. So we believe that this is probably the way forward, but as I shared, our network can't do it alone, and we know that the key areas of where this can be envisioned or realized are in real-world assets or what we think go onto real-world applications, ESG, which depend on multiple differing systems to be able to compute some meaningful data. And so that's why we launched with Web3 Labs here in Hong Kong and Summer Capital, the Global Accelerator Program, where developers can work quite closely with government enterprise stakeholders here in Hong Kong, supported by the progressive regulations here, to then be able to build real-world assets for the next billion users. So we're excited to engage with you. We have a booth down in E04, but also we've been sponsoring coffee for the conference. So if you feel that you need a coffee fix, but also want to talk about how to build out for real-world use cases, please give us a shout, and we're excited to be working with you. And thank you again to Web3 Festival for having us. Thank you.